Spain's ruling party, the PSOE, has won the country 98% of the total votes, 23 seats. The Indigenous Party secured 42, together with left-wing bloc seats in Parliament. Of the 100 for an absolute majority. This means that the PSOE will now likely enter into an alliance with the support of other parties, while the right party won just 60, which is less than half of the number. The far right will enter the Spanish parliament for the first time since the end of Franco's dictatorship, with the Vox winning 10% of votes.
Today, and our country has shown millions participated in these elections to defend democracy, to defend the future of our country and people's rights, all the rights we gained after 40 years of dictatorship.
The far right has officially far-right Vox, despite their supporters' hopes for an even larger number of seats.
Clearly say to all of Spain that Vox has come to stay. But first of all, we want to thank our 2.5 million compatriots.
Has won in Catalonia. The party in the region, the general election during the democratic period. Voter turnout was high, with an increase of almost 20% following these elections.
I don't think there will be stability.
Win, they could exert their power, but I stick to my radical, and there are always nonsense, and that's how I think.
International analyst Ivan Oro joining us from Barcelona. Ivan, thanks so much today. Moved by in these elections.
I think that during the election, during the campaign, it was actually a very emotional campaign. It was not very high on content; it was very high emotion. I think that in Spain we had a moment and was tested how and this historical right-wing populism was going to be a major player in not only in the election but also in the political life. I think that the issue of Catalan far-right electorate or stir very intense emotions, but it actually did also the and went to vote.
Issues in Spain did any of these issues arise during the campaign period within the debates, and in what significant way?
That the increasing inequality, the amount of people that is getting evicted from their houses, the amount of people that don't get enough money to get until to reach the end of the month. Those questions were minority, they were secondary in this election. Questions and tried to put them in the center of the debate, but it was a very complicated moment for doing that because the discussion, the debate was highly polarized, as I said before, around essentialist questions, not essential for the working. Major, very big word during. But not the Spain, let's say, down to earth, not the Spain that interests or makes a difference for the people that is having a hard time, making their families go through the month and paying their bills. they voted for the Socialist Party. And I think that we have to say that the big winner in this election was Pedro Sanchez and the Socialist Party, because they recognized that at least some of the things that he promised to do were met. They raised also with the influence and the weight of Unidos Podemos, which was a major drive into this move of the Socialist Party towards more. But that
movement and performance on the far right during and now with these results.
I think that in the end we could see that the fragmentation did not sum up. There was one very basic hypothesis that will center-right. Ciudadanos, which is this new, more liberal party, which was, radical, and Vox, Franco government, and that happened some months ago. Testing it at the national level was the main issue this time. Well, in the end, we have seen that the popular parties scenario from happening. Important result for Ciudadanos. It is not a definite victory because they don't surpass the popular party, and at the same time they have abandoned the center that had put them in shooting the to the very socialist party. And Vox itself, I think it is a very important result for them to reach. But in the end, you can see that, not even getting a very important gain, and they have conditioned to a large extent the debate during the election. So that's, having that visibility, being able to impact this election is the.
I'd like to ask you, for us here in Latin America, why might these elections have any relevance? In what ways Latin American discourse during campaigning?
Or the international scenario was virtually absent in Spanish politics in the last years is Venezuela. And to a much lesser extent, Cuba, Nicaragua, considered allies of, evil communism. Part in this 2016. I think that in that sense, when Podemos was the real danger to the establishment, Venezuela was a card that everyone was willing to play to diminish the potential of Podemos to make a big result. So in that it has appeared. Because basically real fear.
Much for speaking with us, Ivan Orosa on the Welcome back. Thousands of social leaders arrived in Bogota in what's being called a refugee guarantees to life. The government has breached preparing to stay at. They say that they plan to stay until. Venezuelans celebrated their country's final withdrawal from the Organization of American States, all across the country in defense of the nation's sovereignty and peace. Raised its voice in defense of Venezuela and against the aggression of the United States.
This is an affirmation that the international vanguard and the new homeland are all to follow. Never benefited anyone, not just Venezuela. It didn't benefit Cuba. The OAS was useless when the Malvinas were disputed, and it was no good when all of our people were subjected to hardship.
And Foreign Minister Jorge Ariaza spoke during the rally after having just been sanctioned by the U.S.
We are more independent. To the 7th, we are more independent than we were on the 26th. We are deepening our freedom. This is part of Simón Bolívar's battle for independence, which we are carrying forward in the 21st century. We must be...
Leaving the OAS was a process which began 2 years ago, when the Venezuelan government decided to leave the organization. That was after a series of attacks by the Secretary General and a group of countries allied with the United States.
Venezuela is withdrawn to protect its sovereignty and the Venezuelan people from a body that has been backing a right-wing coup.
They have broken the basic principles of multilateral system, and of course they have trampled. In fact, this is a coup against the
It is a violation of international law, of good practice and normal relations between states. Mr. Trump burst onto the Latin American scene without ever thinking that we are not his chicken coop.
At Venezuela's last meeting of the OAS, something quite unprecedented. Council recognized something that doesn't exist with nobody elected.
This resolution exemplifies a case where a simple majority of member states can impose their will on all member states. This is an tiny decision. It's a sad day at the OAS when a group of member states can impose their will on democracy.
Second refers to the appointment of Minister Representative of Venezuela at the OAS. This letter was signed by Mr. Juan and as interim that Mr. Guaidó proclaimed himself to be interim president on February 20 was sent. These discrepancies undermine this organization. My delegation feels that the OAS is not a supranational body, so it can't impose a completely new government with a simple majority of votes. This would set a dangerous precedent.
They couldn't get their way, and they had to cast aside all pretenses of the override the member states, and in the end, they left the OAS as an empty shell. This proves that the decision to leave was the right one, and Venezuela will never return to this
of the OAS until Saturday, when there will be celebrations in Caracas. It's a demonstration of sovereignty.
And this is how the representative of Guaidó began.
Yo estaba en Venezuela en febrero, no vi eso. Nadie en la calle. Sí, embajador. Hay muchos para el gobierno.
No, muchos paramilitares, muchos colectivos, muchos asesinos. Le regalo los lentes para que.
¿Cuándo estaba en Venezuela?
Hace 5 años.
Venezuela now holds high the banner of multilateralism. It will continue to defend the rule of international law at the UN and combat the principle that might is right.
Sent over 100 Honduran, including 63 minors. 4 Hondurans were deported because of their irregular status in Mexico. The move comes after around 1,300 migrants escaped from a detention center in the Mexican town, United States. CARICOM leaders will meet in Trinidad on Friday to discuss security issues. This comes amid criminal activities in the region, including gang and gun violence and high murder rates. The 19th special meeting of CARICOM heads on security will drive implementation of the regional security framework. CARICOM leaders will also review a rapid response mechanism. This includes developing investigative teams to assist with intelligence-led operations and legal teams to strengthen prosecution of perpetrators. Now to Brazil, where around 4,000 indigenous people gathered in the capital for lives and rights.
Officials to demand an end to policies which jeopardize their lives and well-being.
We went to the health ministry, where they handle the needs to people who live from their community. The subsystem that is traditional and religious methods of healthcare, and it's funded by the federal government, including its funding.
The presence of heavily armed troops near the encampment. These troops were deployed to keep order around
our people as well as our lands. Healthcare, to education, to everything. Since the day he took office, he started to attack it. We are here in peace, in defense of our rights. We will remain united. There will be no bloodshed, but our fight will continue.
In this encounter, demand the annulment of decrees, which would dismantle a number of institutions that defend indigenous rights and help deliver healthcare and education to these communities.
We'll take a short... Welcome back. A week, 159 people, suicide bombers. Few workers in Mozambique are racing floodwaters rain on the region people. Authorities have warned that persons living near rivers should move to cyclone. The South African government is not giving up the search for people who went missing during the days of apartheid. As the country marks 25 years since the fall of apartheid, many as 1,000 families.
Anti-apartheid activists training abroad.
But after
the post-mortem, the Sinuma family unexpectedly found their answers as political offenders cooperated would be granted amnesty. And as film and spies responsible for Nceba's disappearance came forward, the TRC that handing him a limb that exploded in his possession.
We had grown to hate our totally
dating revelation. A team of experts who'd search for the remains of people like Nceba. A list was drawn up.
1962
perpetrators at the TRC.
What happened was they blew up a body or they left the body lying in the field. Then villagers will go past, found a body of a
where the body buried.
When there is no markings, we start opening graves in the area that was used and try to reconstruct the cemetery records with what we the body.
Really
Brother, a Nceba's family.
Aba recognized like South Africa. In South Africa,
Their stories on our web, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.